Hello and welcome back to Video Games. I'm Tim Rogers. You are watching the Action Button review of Cyberpunk 2077. Now, let's talk about talking about Cyberpunk 2077. Cyberpunk 2077 is a can of cans of worms. Cyberpunk 2077 is the elephant habitat at an otherwise tiny zoo. The phrase Cyberpunk 2077 yields 228 million Google search results as of the exact moment of writing this script. Mahatma Gandhi yields 43,700,000 search results. The two words Jesus Christ yield 513 million search results. As of this writing, Cyberpunk 2077 is therefore at least 44.4% as popular a conversation topic as some 2.4 billion human individuals' favorite Lord and Savior. If we restrict our Google search to Cyberpunk 2077 review, we still rake in an impressive 84,200,000 search results. Now, I realize that doesn't mean 84,200,000 distinctly unique people have reviewed Cyberpunk 2077, though this points to at least 84,200,000 people talking about Cyberpunk 2077 reviews. That's still 1.9 times as many people who are out there typing Gandhi's full religious title into their blogs. Google returns only 15,100,000 search results for the name Orson Welles, and 23,200,000 search results for the words Citizen Kane. In summary, the human race, as today's Google represents it, stands 3.6293 times as interested in discussing the critical reception to Cyberpunk 2077 as it is interested in any information at all about the much ballyhooed greatest film of all time. I fully understand the flimsiness of this information. I know that humans in general treasure novelty. Medium fully became message longer ago than I exited the womb of a addict in the hospital. I could quote grave or bold or even fascinating topics humans would ignore in the name of discussing Cyberpunk 2077's critical reception for a longer period of time than it's going to take me to thoroughly review the game itself. We could spend hours getting right here again and again and again. Rather than get right here 107 easy times, I'll take the bold step of getting right here exactly twice. Once right now, and once more much later in this review. However, while we are here, let me draw one tentative conclusion that I'd like you to bear in mind for the remainder of this program. I hypothesize that the more someone discusses any object, the less anyone else can ever possibly understand it. Even the best of rhetorical brain surgeons cannot ever remove the words of others from anything. Here I'd also like to remind you of the guy who messaged me to inform me he was canceling his Patreon pledge because he wanted me to review a more popular game than Tokimeki Memorial. Buddy, I dedicate this segment to you. You know what other two-word phrase yields more Google search results than Citizen Kane? Keanu Reeves. Versus Citizen Kane, Keanu Reeves wins 27.7 to 23.2. And with that as our springboard, let's dive in to the context zone. Elephant Zero, Keanu Reeves. At the conclusion of their Xbox press briefing at the 2019 Electronic Entertainment Expo, Microsoft played a new, robust trailer for CD Projekt Red's Cyberpunk 2077. The game had been announced in 2012 with only trickles of information drippling out over the ensuing 7 years. The 2019 E3 trailer blew the final set of doors off their hinges. At the end of the trailer, shockingly, awe-inspiringly, and breathtakingly, viewers, either fleshly present in the arena, relaxing in front of their living room television, or gargoyling over laptops in hotel rooms around the world, witnessed a low-key introduction to a world-inflaming talking point. Keanu Reeves was in Cyberpunk 2077. He played a guy based evidently on himself, wearing sunglasses and sporting a shiny silver metal arm. As the first few seconds of footage rolled onto a global audience, tens of old-school tabletop board game aficionados fired shotguns of knowledge into the imperturbably frozen tundra of Twitter. "That's not just Keanu Reeves," they shouted into the shrieking zeitgeist of a hard earth. "That's Johnny Silverhand." The discussion of this moment's loudness unrolled at the speed of a video game trailer. And then, without mercy, the universe did not stop giving. From a cloud of white smoke and after a brief Joker stares double fist pump gesture, Keanu Reeves himself emerged to shout enthusiasms in character as himself at the thousands of fleshly and millions of virtually present individuals whose voices and hearts swelled with the shrill thrill of a validation whose like they'd never again bodily know. "This guy up here on a stage about a video game has more Google search results than Citizen Kane," someone with a notebook probably shouted at his wife. It was murderously huge. I should know. I was there. I was there gargoyling over a laptop in a hotel room. I did have an invitation to that Xbox event, though. I could have been there. I just hadn't wanted to go. Why would I want to go to that? My hotel had a pool on the roof, yet the sensation infected even me. I instantly called myself many variations of idiot in as many languages as I had wasted my life learning to speak. Here I had had an opportunity to exist and breathe within 2,000 feet of Keanu Reeves, and I had squandered it because I wanted to rest and take it easy. At the time this particular Electronic Entertainment Expo occurred, I enjoyed twice monthly direct deposits from a corporation that owned many websites, including one I used as a tool for building the audience that would, 9 months later, decide to back me on Patreon so that I could make this exact video presentation you find yourself watching right this moment. I was in E3 on the filthy dime of some private equity scumbags who just bought up my employer. I was there too, and I quote, "capture any viral clips, presentation bloopers, or unexpected reveals." And I'm not just talking about wardrobe malfunctions. I'm talking about new Smash characters. In my bathrobe, lights low, curtains closed, sunglasses on, beneath the crisp white sheeted hotel bed covers, heavy with the weight of an anaconda's nest of cords and cables, a living embodiment of 1/4 of the scenes in Serial Experiments Lane, I sat capturing every millisecond of the Microsoft press briefing, my virality senses tingling with capital punishmental electricity. I pressed a hot key and off slid a warm, thin slice of viral cold cut, the Keanu moment. Before the 21st century's arch nemesis, hotel Wi-Fi, could adequately provide my content to a hungry web audience, someone back at the home office in New York City had already sniper headshotted it. There, live on Kotaku.com's YouTube channel, was a video entitled "Keanu Reeves Reveals Cyberpunk 2077 Release Date at E3 2019. Personally, I'd have pubbed it with a tentative title like Keanu! Though when you're working with fat pipes like they had at HQ, you can spare more than half a moment in the name of fans. They had better hardware. I had, let's face it, a child's laptop, sniffing for Wi-Fi that might as well have been fairy dust. I'd never stood a chance. Over the next several days, I hit the Electronic 3 convention with my distinguished producer Matthew Reyes, and together we shot what I do not say lightly represented my best work at that point in time. I interviewed Goichi Suda. I interviewed Toshihiro Nagoshi. I conducted an interview from beneath the crisp white covers of my hotel bed. I reacted to every single booth with impromptu observations. And on the final day, I committed my masterwork. In the last 30 minutes of E3, I sought to rekindle the childlike wonder video games had given me during my very first experience at the convention 18 years previous. I challenged myself to drink as many free energy drinks and sit in as many gamer chairs as I could in the 30 minutes before the sounding of the final gong. They hadn't had gamer chairs at my first E3, just energy drinks, though gamer chairs are certainly the energy drink of a new generation. More on that later. At one point in this end of E3 video, I held a free, ice-cold Bang energy drink up to my jugular vein and quoted, "I need something cold. I need to cool my blood down. My blood is too hot right now. I gotta freeze my blood before it gets back to my brain." I point out this specific moment right here because it will become important much later in this review. My masterwork, as it were, once minutely edited by myself and scored with ample royalty-free clown jazz of meticulously leveled volume, accumulated 2,000 views in 2 weeks, and 25,000 views over what now inches toward 2 years. I promise I'm not posing when I say I don't look at the numbers. I don't care about the numbers. I care about the work. If you like anything at all about my videos, there's a larger than massive chance it has something directly to do with my caring far more about the work than about the numbers. Yet those who decide upon one of the numbers life under capitalism requires me to care about certainly cared more about the numbers than they did about the work. During an all-hands call involving the entire video department, the talentless piece of trash, no offense to him by the way, earning 6 times my salary to do absolutely nothing except put his fancy shoes on all the furniture in the office, ran joylessly down a list of the month's top-performing videos, counting down from number 10 like a lobotomized David Letterman. I listened, leaning back in my office chair, one earbud in, sipping a horrible coffee. I knew none of my videos would make the list. I listened because that paycheck kept showing up and I had to at least pretend I was interested in the numbers or else they might revoke my Writers Guild card. So when he got to number 1, this guy said, and I quote, "Number 1, this one right here, Keanu Reeves reveals Cyberpunk 2077 date at E3 2019? This got 1 million views. Good job, guys. I promise I don't care about the numbers. I really, really don't. You need to believe me when I say that because that's what gives any meaning at all to what I'm about to say. That really hit me. Have you noticed how many actors win Academy Awards for Best Actor or Best Actress for playing another famous person? We've all seen Stephen Hawking on television, and we generally know what that guy's like. Gary Oldman won for playing Winston Churchill. Daniel Day-Lewis won for playing Abraham Lincoln. I could go on. And in another universe, this other guy at the video department won that month's hiddling little Academy Award for playing Keanu Reeves. For the simple viral lunch meat factoid capturance of, dude, Keanu Reeves is in a video game. It didn't even matter which video game. I felt a corner of my soul painfully peeling off the surface of the 21st century like the back of the vitreous gel off my retina. I understood myself and the world a little bit more, and I almost wept at my inability to do anything at all with that understanding. 1 year and 9 months later, that video has 2.8 million views on YouTube. It's one of the top 5 videos on the entire YouTube channel to which I salariedly contributed content for a period of 3 years. All 5 of the top 5 videos are re-uploads of E3 trailers, clipped from live-streamed presentations. Number 7 is an archive of a stream where I made Bennett Foddy play through Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy. You have to go all the way to number 14 before you encounter an original piece of scripted content, which just so happens to be my 37-minute review of Dragon Quest XI. Its length quite radical in its day, though I should like to think I've since rendered it a cartoonish Wikipedia stub of itself. I wrestled with many emotions upon realizing that a clippet of a live stream by a large corporation featuring a renowned celebrity so thoroughly crushed my most elaborately planned exploits. I promise, I do not think I could possibly beat Keanu Reeves in literally any kind of fight. It makes absolutely perfect sense to me that a video stublet of that beautiful man heating up a crowd would obliterate anything that derives 100% of its appeal from the barrel bottom of my fine wine middle-aged white man personality. I'm not whining when I say Keanu Reeves beat me up. I'm being honest here, it really humbled me. Made me think about a lot of things. I won't regale you with the whole lot of things it made me think. At least, not right now. Keanu Reeves' emergence from the wall of white smoke billowing out and under that slowly opening vertical door rang a bell that ripped through the entire past and future history of video games. Time will only continue to demonstrate the hugeness of this moment. 10 years from now, we'll all be Kevin Costner, and Keanu Reeves is our forever John F. Kennedy. One of the lines in Keanu Reeves' prompter script included the word breathtaking.
The feeling of being there, of walking the streets of the future, is really going to be breathtaking.
Which prompted a live meat human's self-control mechanisms to fail such that he shrieked, "You're breathtaking." Which prompted Keanu Reeves to permanently cross the line that separates real human being from real hero, as he pointed and screamed back at the exact man,
"You're breathtaking!"
"You're breathtaking." As of this exact moment in world history, Keanu Reeves had spent more of his life as a famous person than as anything else. His first role in a massive hit film had occurred over 30 years before he stepped onto that stage at E3. He'd been 24 years old when he starred as a 17-year-old in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. He was 55 when he emerged from that smoke and nominated a random man breathtaking. Elsewhere, perhaps, signals of the man's mortality existed for any aspiring opportune glimpsers. Yet here he was, charmingly putting his whole humanity on loud display to a forest fire's worth of exaltation for the viral. With evident realness, Keanu Reeves, the man, child of mortals, giggled and chuckled at the wall of loud sound and invisible meat that lurked beyond the bright lights. "It's time," he said, "that he finish reading what's on this prompter here and let everybody know the release date of this upcoming hotly anticipated video game that every joystick toucher in history had probably yearned either generally or specifically for at some point in the past." Keanu Reeves, the God-Man, with grand gestures, delivered a lightning bolt and a thunderclap to all assembled onlookers. April 16th, 2020. One needed not a psychologist-diagnosed over-appreciation of numerology to find joy worth shouting about in these plain, unimpressive numerals. April 16th, 2020 would be the 107th day of a leap year, one day short of the number spiritual interest of any Hindus or Buddhists. If with the twin interests of a mathematician and a statistician we dissect this number, if we add up the day numbers of the release dates of the games awarded Game of the Year the past 5 years at Jeff Key 3 Keighley's The Game Awards between 2014 and 2018, and we average them, we wind up with the pristine number 107, meaning that Cyberpunk 2077's developers, CD Projekt Red, originally intended to release it on what the past 5 years of history dictated was the absolute, perfectly luckiest day to release a Game of the Year candidate. Though I dare say not a single one of the fans setting that arena spiritually on fire with their shrieks had done that exact full calculation before making the decision to yell. They were yelling simply for yelling's sake, and yelling's sake might as well have had the name Keanu Charles Reeves on its birth certificate. Keanu Charles Ted Theodore Logan Point Break Neo Matrix Reeves, God-Man, Google bester of even Citizen Kane, stood there as perfectly human as any one of us and, for a paycheck we cannot understand, yelled a jubilant lie at us. At the most calculatedly humanized moment in his right now intersecting professional and personal lives, CD Projekt Red made ultra-celebrity Keanu Reeves tell a lie. If I were Keanu Reeves, I'd sue. Though, given the hyper-nebulous nature of everything else I'm about to say, I don't know if even the worst lawyer could put a coherent case together which defined even the roughest sketch of the exact damages. And that's precisely what makes reviewing Cyberpunk 2077 so difficult. Later journalistic investigations revealed that the April 16, 2020 release date Keanu Reeves announced for Cyberpunk 2077 was blisteringly unrealistic. CD Projekt Red had never, since development began, for a minute been on track to actually release anything more complicated than a piñata full of condoms on April 16, 2020. They told the lie because it looked and sounded especially good with the chosen mouthpiece and venue. The lie's impact softened in pairing with the clear factual reveal of Keanu Reeves as performing the role of the star character in the game. We in the Cyberpunk 2077 Anticipators Club had never had any inkling whatsoever that Keanu Reeves would be involved at all. For many of us, his contribution constituted icing on a cake made of icing. Now it gets trickier. 18 months after Keanu Reeves' E3 stage appearance, Cyberpunk 2077 finally released to a disastrous antithesis of acclaim. Prior to conducting my research for this part of my review, I wrote my own review, as you'll see in the following sections. Then, as research for this section, which I wrote second to last, I write my introductions dead last, as I explained and or will explain in the introduction that as of this exact typing moment, I haven't begun writing yet. I read every mainstream publication review of Cyberpunk 2077 I could find. One trend emerged with ghostly slowness. A disturbingly high majority percentage of classifiably negative reviews laud the performance of the game's voice cast only as a setup to lambaste the casting of Keanu Reeves. Several of the negative reviews I read in a row celebrated the performance of Female V, and then called Keanu Reeves' performance stiff or dry within the same sentence. I cannot accept this. Cyberpunk 2077 and the discourse hurricane it brought with it introduced video game critics to the 2-inch-high mental hurdle film critics took decades to slime their way over. Keanu Reeves is good. He's good in everything. If he showed up in roughly the same place where your cameras and microphones were, your movie or music video or whatever it is at the very least pretty good. Yes, this means even The Matrix Reloaded is pretty good. I don't make the rules. Also, the Fast and Furious movies are all good. Every single one of them, for a similar reason, even though Keanu Reeves isn't in any of them. He should be in one of them. And I don't mean as a John Wick crosser, I mean he should play himself. Film critics took decades to understand this. Not me. I remember elitists deriding Keanu Reeves as early as my 13th summer on Earth. On the occasion of his daring to play the part of a surfing undercover FBI agent in Catherine Strange Days Bigelow's crime fiction mood masterpiece, Point Break, our local newspaper's perpetually negative film critic had jumped upon the occasion to remind us that just 2 years previous, this supposed star had played the part of a dumb teenage kid, cheating on his homework with a time machine. As a 12-year-old, Point Break thrilled me. I didn't even pick up on any of the masterfully subtle homoerotic themes. Or maybe I did. It's probably too late to know for sure. Keanu Reeves, as Ted Theodore Logan, had big brotherly blessed me with an amateur numerologist's love of the number 69.
69, dudes!
As Keanu Reeves went on to star again and again in action films, I never stopped watching. Back then, my aunts all said my big brother looked like Keanu Reeves, and maybe he did. Maybe that's why I looked up to Keanu Reeves, because why the heck would I look up to the guy whose whole physical appearance boiled down to just kinda looking like him? In 1994's Speed, when Keanu Reeves said, "Pop quiz hot shot," to Dennis King Koopa Hopper, I beamed with a "that's my big brother up there" sort of pride. Here in Keanu Reeves was a guy who could play a dumb teenager cheating on his homework with a time machine in a comedy that hinged on an elaborate Doctor Who reference, though 2 years later could be cast on his pretty boy good looks in a serious film with a title literally derived from a B-52's song. Keanu Reeves could play an undercover agent who tells his boss,
Caught my first tube this morning, sir.
and then, a few short years later, effortlessly become the racially ambiguous empty vessel carrying the cyberpunk genre into mainstream marketable territory as Johnny Mnemonic Smith. 4 years later, he played Thomas Neo Anderson, and he's never stopped being the Keanu Reeves ever since. Keanu Reeves' position at the vortextual center of Cyberpunk 2077 discourse parallels his position in the game. In Cyberpunk 2077, the video game, Keanu Reeves plays Johnny Silverhand, frontman of the legendary underground rock band Samurai. 54 years before the story of Cyberpunk 2077 starts, Johnny Silverhand committed a murderous, gruesome act of nuclear terrorism upon the headquarters of one of the world's biggest corporations, before disappearing for good. He enters the story as a digital engram. Before Johnny died, his nemesis extracted his personality and uploaded it as a construct into a high-tech prison of souls. Like every other theme within Cyberpunk 2077, this only hints at deeper questions, leaving the digging up to us. In Cyberpunk 2077, Keanu Reeves' character Johnny Silverhand's soul construct becomes, via misadventure, trapped in the brain of the hero V, whom we roleplay. If V doesn't figure out how to get Johnny out of their head, V will die and Johnny will take over. If V does get Johnny out of their head, Johnny's soul will die out from the world. Johnny only ever talks to V. Every Johnny line has a counterpart response from V. In one nifty way, this decentralizes and defamiliarizes the nature of the protagonist. V and Johnny start naturally as worst enemies and end up at an understanding of a depth dictated meaningfully by the player's conversation decisions and side quest completions. Once you reach the story point at which he gets lodged in your brain, Keanu Reeves appears everywhere in Cyberpunk 2077. He leans against walls, looking bored during many side quest dialogues. At times, he chimes in to comment on the weight of one moral decision versus another. He gets mad at you sometimes if you narc out at the end of a side quest. In summary, Cyberpunk 2077 offers players the opportunity to roleplay a person in whose head Keanu Reeves lives rent-free. Actually, I gotta ask, how is this supposed to be science fiction? Keanu Reeves has lived in my head ever since that day in 1989 when my dad rented Dangerous Liaisons. I ain't even kidding. That day in 1989, my dad literally said, "I rented Dangerous Liaisons. It's got that John Malkovich in it." That was the first time I ever heard the word Malkovich spoken aloud. My dad made me put a throw pillow over my head when Uma Thurman was naked. I never saw Uma Thurman's nude scene until I was 28. Anyway, Keanu Reeves was in there and I was like, that guy's hot. Likewise, Keanu Reeves lived rent-free in the heads of nearly every video game critic or reporter who witnessed even a single GIF of his breathtaking E3 appearance. The triumph with which he'd crashed that stage stained all conversation about the game that could ever happen afterward. The bombast of the Keanu moment pulled every talking point about Cyberpunk 2077 before or after into focus. Until, the game came out, at which point everyone had seemingly agreed it was kosher to call a Keanu Reeves performance wooden again. Calling Keanu Reeves wooden in 2020? He's not wooden. He's Keanu Reeves. That is him.
A while back, the guys from CD Projekt Red approached me and asked me to be a part of their new project, Cyberpunk 2077.
You know what else is wooden and natural at the same time? Trees. You don't make fun of trees. I do not have time to teach every video game critic to appreciate the intricacies of Keanu Reeves. All I'll say is, if you want to chill with me, you have to just accept that Keanu Reeves' surreal accent and overall bizarre performance as Jonathan Harker in 1992's The Godfather's Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula amounts to a work of found object art on the exact level of Marcel Duchamp's Fountain.
Yes, of course, sir. If I may inquire, what in fact happened to Mr. Renfield in Transylvania?
Clearly Coppola meant something when he emasculatingly juxtaposed that particularly youthly Keanu Reeves against the tiger-like likes of literally Anthony Hopkins the Titan and Gary Oldman the Dragon. And if you don't understand that, never come anywhere near my house. I myself have personally only ever rehabilitated one Keanu Reeves hater in my life, and that's my buddy Brandon Sheffield. Brandon was a locally famous Matrix hater when I first met him. I was able to turn him around to Keanu Reeves' fanhood by perfectly neglecting to ever mention the film Johnny Mnemonic in his presence. I knew he'd love Johnny Mnemonic for the same sorts of reasons he loves Christopher the Highlander Lambert, though I also knew he'd never watch, let alone like, a film if I told him to watch it. So I waited for a period of about 20 years for him to encounter and watch the film of his own volition. It worked. 2 weeks later, he'd seen and liked all 3 John Wick films. And the last time we talked about The Matrix, he said, "I guess it's good." The Matrix is better than good. It is a masterpiece of action, science fiction, and pop culture. It grapples with themes of identity and possesses an unimpeachably perfect structure. Furthermore, it's worth screaming about that Keanu Reeves studied actual kung fu under drunken master Wing Chun and Iron Monkey director Yuen Wu-ping for 6 months prior to starring in The Matrix. And afterward, he never stopped.
I know kung fu.
Keanu Reeves even went on to later direct his first ever feature film, Man of Tai Chi, in which he played the villain, and his real-life teacher, Tiger Chen, played the starring role.
You owe me a life.
Keanu even directed Iko the Raid to Uwais as a henchman in Man of Tai Chi. Just 2 years ago, Keanu Reeves showed up in a supporting role as a bizarre parody of himself in a Netflix original comedy. This is a man with some staggering professional humility. Let's summarize. Keanu Reeves has played an idiot, a pretty boy, a surfing undercover cop, an emblem of fragile maleness amidst a maelstrom of masculinity horror, a science fiction everyman, a science fiction Jesus, an evil foreign devil villain in a Chinese martial arts movie, a vengeful hitman exacting meticulous revenge in dark, comically escalating circumstances, and a jerk boyfriend version of himself in a romantic comedy. So when Keanu Reeves shows up in Cyberpunk 2077 and plays a dead rock star terrorist trapped in another person's mind and yearning to tie up all the emotional loose ends he left behind 50 years ago, playing once again against type, defying our ever-tectonic expectations of what grace and life this man brings to everything he touches, and a video game critic on a website with the word game in the name of it somewhere dares to call him stiff and wooden. I've got to say, my spider sense stands up. It seems to me the critic doth hate too much, and they're hating the actor when they should be hating the developer. As they say, let not the sins of the player visit upon the sins of the game. In summary, no catalog of participations in masterpieces vaccinates even Keanu Reeves against the virus of discourse. God save Cyberpunk 2077, and God save us all. Well, I guess I just talked about Keanu Reeves for, check watch. I don't have my watch on. How many minutes was that? Oh, like 30 minutes? Let's see what else what else do I have time for here. I said at the beginning of this, I believe I said I would react to every morsel of discourse. Let's see how fast I can do that. We're on number 1 here. Elephant number 1, the name. Every discourse morsel I'm about to react to within this segment, I researched thoroughly before typing up this elephantine script. Except this first one. I figured in the spirit of the big point I'm going to make at the very end of this video, it behooves me to leave one discourse morsel untouched within the banks of my memory. As I've said before, my memory horrifies me with its accuracy. Autobiographically speaking, I remember the day CD Projekt Red announced that they were working on a game called Cyberpunk. It was 2012. Grand Theft Auto V had not been released yet. CD Projekt Red had, at that point in time, only released The Witcher 1 and The Witcher 2. If you'd played both of those games at that point in time, you probably also didn't shut up about either of them. Though also, interestingly, if you'd played either of those games at that point in time, no one cared what you had to say about them, or anything. I'd played them both. History shows that on the day CD Projekt Red dared announce they were making a game called simply Cyberpunk, they had not yet made, much less released, The Witcher 3. So it was that the first conversation I heard about this game, called simply Cyberpunk, included an interjection from an ignored bystander who insisted those Witcher games are actually pretty good, though. Lord. Nothing doesn't sell a piece of work like some uninvited weirdo saying it's actually pretty good, though. I saw that guy and I winced, because had I still been the person I'd been just a couple years earlier, I'd have been saying the same thing, maybe even the same way. This specific rando, insisting that those Witcher games were actually pretty good, though, did so beneath a post of grandstanderly incredulity of the "you've gotta be kidding me" variety. The original poster, or OP as savvy netizens called him, had invited mockery of the very idea of calling a video game cyberpunk. I saw several more posts that day, all of the same texture. I saw a post on Facebook, and here I resist the urge to look it up, both because Facebook doesn't like letting you look stuff up, because that would be bad for their business, and their business is making you think you are connected to some kind of information. And also, I don't want to look it up because I want you to trust me. I saw a post on Facebook that said, and I quote, "Calling a game cyberpunk is like calling a first-person shooter first-person shooter." I distinctly remember seeing this post and yearning to reply, though I instantly remembered the man who'd insisted that those Witcher games are actually pretty good, though, and I stayed my hand. Also, there I had a moment. Were those Witcher games actually pretty good, though? I mean, anything can be good if you're the guy you know who experienced it. On that day, many people in the replies tried to bring up Mike Pondsmith's role-playing game. All were reduced to rando status with a simple lol or okay. This was, of course, 2012. The discourse machine yet lacked much of the oil coursing through its metal veins today. Back then, you could still go viral with a blog post much longer than 280 characters. Yet my memories of that day give me a crystal snapshot of the Niagara Falls to issue forth with eventuality. Namely, I saw another post that day in which a man had said that calling a game cyberpunk is like trademarking the phrase role-playing game. I remembered this post 5 years later. Elephant number 2, the trademarking. In 2017, CD Projekt Red trademarked the word cyberpunk for use in video game titles. 5 years had passed since CD Projekt Red had announced the name of the game. 2 years had passed since the release of The Witcher 3. 4 years had passed since the release of Grand Theft Auto 5. The discourse machine had achieved near maximum lubrication. I saw the news of the trademark filing popcorned about miles above the surface of the earth with 1,000 snippy sniper rifles. CD Projekt Red, pressed for comment, clarified that they trademarked simply the name Cyberpunk as a title in video games, so that they had some legal recourse should, for example, some wily someone try to release a video game entitled Cyberpunk 2 or Cyberpunk 2078. They promised not to take down any game that included the word cyberpunk in any longer title, though many armchair commenters beneath articles across the internet remained skeptical. I distinctly recall one man beneath a piece saying, and I quote, "This is how it begins." If nothing else, the trademark filing served as the first moderately loud rumble of marketing CD Projekt Red had perpetrated since their long-ago announcement that the game's development was underway. On the day of the trademark filing, I remember thinking that perhaps the announcement in 2012 had only marked CD Projekt Red's decision to someday develop a game called Cyberpunk, and that the development of the game had only truly begun at some point more proximal to the trademark filing than to the announcement. Later investigations by journalist Jason Schreier would show my assumption carried some truth. Though for the record, that day in 2017 marked the first substantial avalanche of the discourse vortex that would continue to surround Cyberpunk 2077 until this present day. On the day of the trademark filing, CD Projekt Red was more than just the makers of 2 games that were actually pretty good, though. They were more than a Polish video game developer. They were the makers of The Witcher 3. They had earned loud buckets of fealty from all persons dedicated enough to savor every morsel of their fantasy masterpiece. In the comments of a Eurogamer report on the trademark filing, one commenter stepped right up and tangentially compared CD Projekt Red's bigness to that of Google. when they said, "Remember, Google's motto used to be, 'Don't be evil.'" Much of the armchair video game critical internet bristled at CD Projekt Red's trademarking of a word so long essential to describing a prominent subgenre of fiction entertainment. Yet at this point, that is, in 2017, 1 year before the Me Too movement truly began, all the marketing blunders of history had yet not accidentally conspired to invent bad publicity. The news of the trademarking resounded like a gong, only inflating the perceived girth of the eventual product. Just 1 year later, in the tiny room called public opinion, elephants began to outnumber people. Elephant number 3, Blogger's Purgatory. Blogger baiting stories began to trickle down the pants legs of CD Projekt Red throughout the years of 2018 and 2019. I was for both of these years employed full-time in talking about video games on the internet. I never specifically released a content piece revolving around Cyberpunk 2077's varying controversies, though I worked with many good people who did. To most easily distill Cyberpunk 2077's hype cycle into one story, we can remark on the instances on which the official goodoldgames.com, aka GOG.com Twitter account perpetrated transphobic replies to innocent queries. GOG.com, in case you've forgotten, is owned by Cyberpunk 2077 and Witcher developer CD Projekt Red. CD Projekt Red's social media person or people doubled and then tripled down on this variety of humor, feeding a certain sinister sub-fragment of its pre-installed fanbase. Perhaps the most important criticism of pre-release Cyberpunk 2077 arose from an investigation by Jason Schreier, who reported on the working conditions of developers at CD Projekt Red. In summary, developers were working too much. The industry calls it crunch. Usually it happens at the end of a project, though Cyberpunk 2077 was such a big project that the developers found themselves lodged in a perpetual terminal stage. CD Projekt Red had committed to making the sort of video game usually made by thousands of developers, though they only had 500 developers. You didn't need any kind of degree in business to ascertain a possible library of management mistakes behind these alleged working conditions. Yet these most clearly reported of allegations, which said nothing perceptibly critical of the possible final product, found the eyes and ears of many eager misunderstanders. I often wonder about the people who would jump up to defend the honor of literally a corporation because of a video game they haven't played that they presume they'll like, minimizing the struggles of the actual humans who made the game. They probably immediately chose Corpo on their first Cyberpunk 2077 playthrough. People in internet comments just can't seem to learn that it really is both possible and even necessary to simultaneously enjoy media while also being critical of its more problematic or pernicious aspects. On July 2nd, 2018, in response to a freshly uploaded trailer, Twitter user Fritz Villahermosa tweeted at the official @CyberpunkGame Twitter account, "Dear @CyberpunkGame, will there be memes in the game? Memes are the future. There has to be memes." First of all, look. Back in 2015, a teenager played my video game Video Ball at a party at PAX. I don't even know how he got in there. It was a party at a bar. I have no idea how he got in there. He was most certainly a rich man's son, like most people with the worst ideas are. He turned to me at one point while playing the game slightly better than most people that weekend had, and said, and I quote, "You know what you should do with this game? You should put memes in there. Like, I score a point and bam, there's a meme." Now, I'm older now than I am young. Though I've got to say, first of all, absolutely not. Second of all, sure, that kid was absolutely right. At any rate, to the question, will there be memes in the game, CyberpunkGame replied, "Whole game is going to be a meme." At the point of this writing, that tweet has 18,100 retweets. I wonder how many of those retweets happened before versus after the game's launch. I could use some simple analytics tools to answer this question, though that would be too much fun for the analytics tools. The day this insipid moment in Twitter history happened, Cyberpunk 2077 had yet to receive a release date. When it did receive a release date, it came fresh-yelled from the hot lips of a bearded Keanu Reeves. and that date turned out to be a lie, and the next date was a lie, and so was the next one. The day I saw this tweet, I made a mental note to make a video about Cyberpunk 2077 hype at least 6 months before the game released. I put it on the back burner. I eventually released that video on my last day working at my previous job. In this video, which I called a pre-review of Cyberpunk 2077, I gushed forth my own hopes and wishes for the game in a hyperbolic manner, hoping to attract the applause of those most bizarre of aspiring corpos. Again and again, I laid out my prediction that Cyberpunk 2077 would win every Game of the Year award possible. I beat that drum until its horse bones turned into hot powder. I did so as aware as anyone else of the background nonsense seeping out from under the crack of CD Projekt Red's door. I did so hoping and praying that time would prove my predictions buffoonish. Though a different, yet no less important part of me would have loved it if the game had actually turned out perfectly. Elephant number 4. The release. Upon the actual release of the game, I began to receive many reminders of my hyperbolic predictions. I noticed a rolling trend. At first, Twitter users regurgitating my words toward me did so playfully. Eventually, the veneer of play fell right off the bone of discourse. People cold tweeted links to my video and captions to the tune of, "Expectations were high, to say the least." Cyberpunk 2077 suffered a critical lambasting upon its release for a pitchfork-Tinsley quantity of reasons. For one, it had been delayed so many times, with delay announcements coming so close to the proposed release dates that the public's faith that the game could possibly be finished at all, much less on time, wavered and waned. For another, many of Cyberpunk 2077's hypers had grown pettier in their obnoxiousness than this still new century yet had any concrete idea what to do with. To wit, Cyberpunk 2077's makers had delighted in informing the public that the game would have Grimes in it, and Grimes has held hands at least once on camera with Elon Musk, and that guy has been on the Joe Rogan Experience. And thirdly, critics laughed at Cyberpunk 2077 because from comfortably outside, it had more problems than non-problems. Today, if you Google Cyberpunk 2077 review, you see, above the Gandhi outnumbering search results, a little helpful Google-generated bulleted list of frequently asked questions. Is Cyberpunk 2077 really that bad? Is Cyberpunk 2077 worth buying? Why is Cyberpunk 2077 so bad? Will Cyberpunk 2077 be better than GTA? The algorithm has spoken. Elephant number 5. Sony pulls the game from the PlayStation Network. The console versions of Cyberpunk 2077 arrived so underbaked as to attract a ravenous wolf pack of haters of the glitch hunter variety. The open-world algorithms spawned too many dildos or hamburgers, depending on its mood. Characters sometimes inexplicably stood up and pantslessly T-posed above their speeding motorcycles. The console version was worse. Videos of the console Cyberpunk 2077 voluminously filling its diaper flooded the internet, earning upvotes and likes and meme reaction gifs in every concerned community. Many fans, some of them serious, launched internet petitions. CD Projekt Red announced it would offer refunds to unsatisfied customers of the console versions of the game. Sony quickly clarified that all refunds would have to go through them, not through CD Projekt Red. Sony then unexpectedly, under historical pressure from a loudening mass of players, removed the game's listing from the PlayStation Network store. As of this writing, it remains invisible to prospective purchasers. So Cyberpunk 2077 had spawned a new variety of video game industry event, a AAA digital unrelease. CD Projekt Red has released multiple patches since the game first went on sale. They announced delays to the downloadable content and to the announced multiplayer mode so that they could focus on continuing to fix bugs. Jason Schreier's reporting intensified in the wake of the game's release. For Bloomberg, he published a massive report of working conditions, of crunch, and of project management gone every which way except not sideways. The game's development was an alleged rat's nest of clumpy gumwads and doll hair. Jason Cyber's Schreierpunk 2077 piece explored many developers' mistaken belief in CD Projekt Red magic. The widespread and immediately repeated belief within the company that we made The Witcher 3, we can make this. I admit, I too fell for that CD Projekt Red magic. I presumed the game would be perfect because what I'd played of The Witcher 3 I'd immediately placed on the highest pedestal in my house. When I finally played Cyberpunk 2077, I personally did so after spending 2 years quietly and not publicly tempering my expectations. I knew well the size of the development studio that made it as compared to the size of the development studio that had made, for example, Red Dead Redemption 2. Expectations thus calibrated, I enjoyed Cyberpunk 2077 quite thoroughly. In my review, I've decided to compartmentalize my good impressions away from my bad impressions, so as to provide those seeking a hit of optimism an easy place to access it, and those seeking a hit of pessimism an easy place to access that. Though I'll say here, up front, that according to my thorough analysis of my 177 hours of game footage, ultimately the good outweighs the bad. I enjoyed more of Cyberpunk 2077 than I did not. However, while reviewing this game, I found myself, more often than not, continuing to wrestle with a series of prickly elephants. The foremost of those elephants involved epilepsy. One reviewer of Cyberpunk 2077 remarked that a scene in the game triggered her epilepsy. Now, I promise I will not show the epilepsy triggering thing in this video. I don't expect any congratulations for that or anything. I mean, what I am about to show you is the post-patch version of the epilepsy triggering thing. After a patch, CD Projekt Red drastically reduced the strobing effect. In fact, it doesn't strobe at all anymore, it just lights up. So when I show it, just imagine it's strobing if you want to. The epilepsy trigger in question happens during the brain dance sequences. Brain dances are the world of Cyberpunk 2077's form of mass-marketed virtual reality. To enter a brain dance, an experiencer puts a little headgear thing on, which flashes 2 strobe lights alternatingly above each of their eyes. It turns out that CD Projekt Red developers had based the strobe pattern of the original pre-patch braindance device on actual known prominent epilepsy trigger patterns. With military-grade precision, they had replicated these exact strobes right here in this video game, as though that were any kind of a good idea at all. Someone who happens to be a video game critic for a large website happens to have an actual epileptic seizure while playing this part in a pre-release copy of the game. They informed CD Projekt Red and the internet at large. CD Projekt Red responded by informing the critic that they would fix the scene as immediately as possible. The very next day, with utmost decency, they released a patch that both introduced an epilepsy warning disclaimer to the beginning of the game and removed the epilepsy trigger from the braindance sequence. I could admonish them for including the trigger in the first place, though enough people have done that by now, so I'll just say it was marvelously professional of them to remove it as quickly as they did. It's not a small amount of work. What interest conflictingly sticks with me is the repugnant manner in which some fans responded. In multiple medium-sized droves, they sent specifically epilepsy-triggering video clips to the critic in question. These people hadn't even played the game yet. They simply found themselves so submerged in a state of hype about a game they felt pretty confident about someday soon liking that they refused to tolerate any criticism of the precious work at all, even objective, scientific criticism. In the past, I've preached about my good time hat. When I decide to enjoy a piece of work before I engage with it, I say I've put on my good time hat. The good time hat allows you, the beholder, to focus on only the beautiful aspects of a work. If you decide to have a good time, you do have a good time. However, I've noticed in recent years that often in the hands of an unskilled wielder, a good time hat goes wrong. On occasion, a previously regularly jolly individual might find that at some motel-adjacent laundromat or another, a mechanical malfunction of nebulous provenance pulls together the knitted threads of that good time hat, which for long decades happily stuffed their trusty duffel, and now subtly they suffer a slow deprivation of circulation skullward at the grip of the now inextricable headwear. At last, the hat too tight, here they find themselves rib-cage deep in the love-hate relationship's less fruitful cousin, the hate-to-love relationship. They have become one of the only sorts of human people worse than a hater. They have become a hater. So it happens that hype-engorged individuals will on occasion commit loud acts of reverse no-man's skying, abominable enough to taint even my ironcladly earnest attempts to enjoy a work. I'm saying y'all out there need to calm down. I saw some guys yelling at a critic who said they didn't play all the side quests and gave the game like a 7 out of 10. These people were like, you shouldn't be allowed to review the game if you didn't play 100% of the side quests. And like, man, I'm sitting here right now, and I definitely did all the side quests. And I gotta say, my overall opinion was definitely pretty locked in, tight at right about the end credits of my first story completion, which I did at like 20% side quests. Didn't meaningfully change that much after that. You people are out there like turning this video game into the Snyder cut of itself, and it's literally already out. The hating of the loud minority of Cyberpunk 2077's card-carrying pre-fans eventually iceberged colloquial critical opinion. The game transformed into a basketball hoop for dunking on itself. It became a nonchalantly passive pastime for even game-adjacent about media talkers to prosaically roll their eyes in one-up-personally soundbite attempts. I saw a guy in my own Discord, discord.gg/actionbutton, aka the Goblin Bunker, literally call Cyberpunk 2077's campaign insanely short. First of all, we don't say insane anymore to modify adjectives. Second of all, buddy, with a scientist's interest, I visited howlongtobeat.com at this moment in the writing process of this script. There, nearly 3,000 players had reported that the main story took them 21 hours to play through. Now, I wouldn't call that insanely short by any stretch, and we'll get into why I think that later in this review, though I will say that I combed through my 177 hours of game footage of Cyberpunk 2077, and I extracted an interestingly different number for the exact length of the campaign. Furthermore, I'd propose that we need to factor the length of at least one of the several main side quest lines into our measurement of the campaign's length. Cyberpunk 2077's modular structure begs for us to do this. Judy Alvarez is a drop-dead beautiful human individual who, as of her exit from the main storyline, has just suffered several tragedies reserved usually for semi-protagonists in a work of 19th century Eastern European literature. When she calls you from the darkest depths of a depressive episode and asks if you'll come over to talk to her, what kind of absolute freak would choose the
"Sorry, I'm busy"
dialogue choice that immediately and mercilessly snips off her character for the rest of the game's campaign? We need to factor in some, not all, some of the side quests to the bare-bones running time of the game, or else we're genuinely talking about it wrong. In this light, saying the campaign is 21 hours feels abjectly ridiculous. Yet 3,000 people clambered over one another to claim that they, too, finished the campaign in 21 hours. Look, I love howlongtobeat.com. At least, I love the idea of it. As someone who plays video games for work and plans my work weeks or months ahead of time, I love knowing generally how many hours it's going to take me to play through a video game. Though I find the lengths reported on howlongtobeat.com often suffer the way recipe estimates do. People underreport length to make themselves look quote-unquote cooler than everyone else claims likewise, so as to not appear slothly, even as a faceless statistic. You know what I'd like? I'd like it if Sony and Microsoft and Steam and whoever else would work together with howlongtobeat.com. I've developed games for all major consoles and for Steam, and I know all about hooking in achievement tracking. Platforms could easily allow developers to background flag content as main campaign or side quest or menu or open world traversal or any other category. With players' consent, games could report these numbers anonymously directly to howlongtobeat.com. Then, a guy like me who just wants to know really exactly how long it takes the average player to get through the main story content in Ghost of Tsushima could find that number without having to play an impossible game of not enough information poker against a wall of faceless liars. Like, if we can't rely on all the power of the internet to tell us generally how long a video game is, what else don't we know for sure about life on this earth? In summary, my experience sifting through the discourse of Cyberpunk 2077 has left me with a renewed urge to propose concrete solutions wherever I see glaring opportunities to do so. It's also left me with a renewed sense of fear at what is happening to human truth. It's left me feeling weak. I usually consider myself immune to hype and able to pierce through every layer of conversation to see only the heart of a work. I was at E3 in a blogger capacity the year Bethesda demoed The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion for Xbox 360. They even invited a jerk like me for a private room appointment to look at the game. They gave me a banana nut muffin the size of my human skull and a good, real cup of coffee. I often think about how many muffin dumpsters it took to convince the world at large that the sequel to Weirdos' favorite game, Morrowind, was an unimpeachably world-class video game. Every time someone says Fallout, I think, well, first I think New Vegas, and then I think Mission Impossible Fallout, and then I think...
I remember kids at school being like, there's this game called Fallout, and you can kill anybody. You can kill the characters in the story.
And then I think Muffin Dumpster. I've thought myself some kind of principled individual to have managed to dislike every Elder Scrolls game since Morrowind, despite the deliciousness of that one very large, long ago muffin. But now that I've seen what I've seen these past several years regarding Cyberpunk 2077, I wonder genuinely where principle ends and contrarianism begins. Often commenters beneath my videos delight in pointing out how long it takes me to start talking, quote, about the game, unquote. I'll admit, I draw out these context zone segments quite balloonishly on purpose, because I hate the people who complain about these segments probably as much as their mothers, significant others, pets, and children do, and I wish they'd go away. I enjoy the quote-unquote joke of making the game appear for many minutes secondary to a discussion of the world that birthed the game. Though on the other hand, context is more than king. Context can be the kingdom itself. I am always talking about the game all of the time. And this rings quadruply true so far for this review of Cyberpunk 2077. All this is taking the long way to say I tried. I tried to separate the discourse from my review of the game. However, after a lengthy scientific analysis, I determined that I simply cannot extricate my opinions on the conversation surrounding Cyberpunk 2077 from my review of Cyberpunk 2077. While I was writing this segment, a news story broke that CD Projekt Red had been hacked, and hackers were holding the game's source code hostage. This is becoming a cartoon. I am not even going to pretend to try to think of something to say about that just for the purpose of talking about it here in the relevant place. Because at the end of the day, maybe the most cyberpunk thing about Cyberpunk 2077 has nothing to do with its plot and everything to do with the fact that as of less than 3 months of its existing, discussion pertaining merely to reviews of Cyberpunk 2077 has reached the Google search result volume yielded from the 25-year-old internet search phrase darling, Final Fantasy VII. So when I say that this next section of this review is about the graphics, man, well, it is. Though it's also about a little bit more than that.
Well, that's the end of part 1. Citizen Keanu is the name I came up with for that one, and I actually did write it in the script. There was a part where I literally said in the script, we call this one Citizen Keanu. And I cut it because nobody flat out says Citizen Kane in Citizen Kane. So I figured if I had said, we call this one Citizen Keanu, it would have looked like I thought I was, of all the things, been on the internet for 20 years now, which is a long time, I would get like 2,800 words from a guy who's like, you think you're so clever for realizing that all the letters of the name Kane exist in Keanu? Keanu is partially anagrammatical with Kane. You think that makes you so smart? I just thought it was a fun title. Originally, that script was quite hairy. It had a lot of extraneous drama to it. There was a little bit too much drama in the Keanu story, and I ended up cutting about 12 minutes here and there. Believe it or not, I do cut stuff. Cut about 12 minutes of that Keanu story. I wrote it in a really cyberpunky style. I tried to go for like a William Gibson style, and I missed the broad side of the biggest barn in town, so I decided I should just pare it down before I embarrass myself. So that's what I did. I pared it down a bit. I don't know if I stopped myself from embarrassing myself with any of that. Watching it again just now on my 77-inch C10 OLED television that I mentioned many, many times in this video. I think the stupid fake computer interface I designed for the part where I'm talking about being a journalist, I really wanted to include more footage of the Westin Bonaventure Hotel, which is featured in the excellent film Strange Days, among other films. Strange Days, I believe, is the best usage of the Bonaventure in a movie. I couldn't cobble together enough footage. I was like literally going to fly to Los Angeles and film a scene there, like a dramatic scene, and then I don't have the filmmaker chops to do that yet. How's my lighting? I lit this scene myself. I wanted it to look cyberpunk. So I ended up thinking, well, what if I just flex my graphic design skills and try to make a 1990s movie authentic computer interface, which is what I did for that part where there's all of the stupid windows on the screen. Put a bunch of cheesy words on there, made the cheesy hacker skull, where it's like you've been hacked and there's a skull on the screen. It's like the kind of thing that my initial plan was to go for the kind of ugly fake computer interface that a visual effects artist on a 1990s film loosely based on an obscure 1980s science fiction short story would presume computer hacker software stuff looked like. I started with like a 1-to-1 in terms of like screen space usage, just a 1-to-1 ripoff of Dennis Nedry's You Didn't Say the Magic Word from the Jurassic Park movie. The Jurassic Park movie? Does anybody call it the Jurassic Park movie? Lord, I've been calling it that in my head since 1993, the Jurassic Park movie. Because I'd read the book at the time I went to see that movie, so I was like, I've just been calling it the Jurassic Park movie for that whole time. Just did not mean to give up that little detail about myself. Anyway, Dennis Nedry, also known as Newman, Wayne Knight, beautiful man. You see Basic Instinct. Wonderful guy. Also, the way the computers look in Jurassic Park, the interface on the computers in Jurassic Park, I was like, I'm just gonna rip this off. And then I did, and it was pure and solid. It was just beautiful gold. And then I was like, I'm just like, okay, I don't know, what if I made it look a little cooler? And then I made it look a little cooler, and then I made it look, I was like, well, now it needs to look worse. And then I made it look like way worse. And then I was like, well, why don't I make it look kind of action button-y? So it's like this action button OS. I think it just ended up looking really bad. Viewing it in a little tiny window, little preview program window in Adobe Premiere, it does not really convey what it's gonna look like in 77 inches of a television screen. And just looking at it, I was like, ah, man. So that's my number one note on that segment. The rest of it, I think I pull the I'm not gonna Google it, because that would be too much fun for Google, for the analytics tools. I pull that one a few too many times, and that's a joke I've been making now for 10 some years. Saying like there's a couple of actionbutton.net reviews where I'm like, oh, reading about it, researching, it's no fun. Let's engage in conjecture. And now there's just so much of that in the world. It's kind of formed the basis of most earthly philosophies at this point have refoundationalized themselves to put, I'm just gonna think about it, original research on this pedestal. Maybe I should retire that particular routine and consider it retired as of this video, as of right now. Do you like how I'm wearing the merch shirt? I bought this shirt on the CD Projekt Red merch store. Bought this jacket as well. Didn't get one of the jackets at E3. Another thing, so I went through the whole Citizen Keanu thing about how I didn't say Citizen Keanu out loud, how I cut that part from the script before, cut it in the bathroom before I sat down to read that part. There's the part where I talk about the game getting pulled from the PlayStation Network. While I was like, oh, what's the title gonna say on screen? And I came up with, I just had the word, oh, it's PlayStation Nation. And then I kicked myself in the butt, stood up, gave it a shot, because I was like, man, that should have been in the script. I could lose 10,000 of these words. Said there's a part where I'm like, a new sort of video game phenomenon had occurred. A AAA digital unrelease. People are gonna tell me something like Super Mario 3D All-Stars got unreleased by Nintendo because they only let it up there for a limited amount of time before telling people they couldn't have it anymore. That's like a planned unrelease. I mean like a literal flat out ice cold, stone cold unrelease. They unreleased the game. If I would have just come up with the word PlayStationation while I was writing the script, we'd all be a whole lot spiritually richer right now. So it is that Cyberpunk 2077 spawned a new type of video game industry event, a PlayStationation. That would have been good. People honking their horns out there. I live in GTA City, by the way, in case you didn't know that. Anyway, that's all of part one. I think the rest of part one's pretty good. Have you picked your next segment now? Unless you chose this as the second segment you want to watch, which is, I guess I just exposed myself as assuming that people would pick them in numerical order. You can pick them in whatever order you want. If you did pick this one as your first, and you're hearing me say this now, it's too late for you to pick another one first and watch this one second, so, oh well. Someone is driving on the street 7 stories beneath us, blasting copyrighted music, so if I don't want this video to get deleted before it can finish processing, or whatever it is YouTube does because of copyrighted music, I'd better stop the recording now. I'll see you again in a matter of seconds.